back to your point about the global South and getting vaccines to the global South and this whole concept of vaccine apartheid. You don't see a lot of the people howling about vaccine apartheid talking about segregationist measures in the countries they live in that are coming into effect. They seem to be standing by silently or supporting them. And at the same time, you know, in some sectors of the left, there's this concept of listening to the voices of the subaltern and people in other countries. Well, we have this huge controversy exploding right now with Nicki Minaj. You know, I'm not a big fan of her music. Like, some of her early verses were pretty good, but then when she went pop, I thought it was really trashy and never gave her that much credit. But, you know, now she is articulating the feelings of a lot of people in the global South about an exported or imposed biomedical despotism that they're deeply uncomfortable with. And she's defending herself in a pretty effective way, and also kind of exploding the bipartisan division over COVID, the culture war. And she has been called apparently by the White House and told to step down. I mean, it all started with her talking about people in Trinidad and Tobago she's related to, who were having adverse effects. And they didn't sound like any adverse effects I've ever heard of, but that's how a lot of people in the global South feel about this. And you're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to talk about polls in Kenya, for example, or other parts of West Africa and sub-Saharan Africa that show that less than 10% of people are eager to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Senegal, countries like this, where a vast majority of people say that they do not consider it a major disruption to their lives. You are not supposed to share a New York Times article, which was very condescending, but shows poll numbers from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip of Palestinians who say in large numbers, like over 80%, that they do not want to take a COVID-19 vaccination. And there are Palestinians making very cogent arguments about wanting to wait to see that it's tested over the course of 3 to 5 years, as other vaccines previously have. Couldn't we understand why they do not want another Western aid package coming straight from USAID injected into their arms? Seems actually pretty rational, but the New York Times reporter says they're victims of disinformation. We recently seen in the past week protests in Tehran that were completely not covered by Western media against vaccine mandates there. And people I've corresponded with in Iran say that the bare majority of those protesting are in the religious or revolutionary camp. That you've seen thousands of people protest in Turkey. This isn't just a Western phenomenon. And people who say that, you know, the real problem here is the failure to get them vaccines. Well, I have no problem, like personally, I wouldn't have any problem with getting access to vaccines that have shown that they can reduce the severity of illness. And I know people who want them, but they're not actually looking at the reality or recognizing that there is there is an ulterior agenda here. It's not just about public health. And we can see in certain states in Nigeria, for example, that people are being cut off from their ability to go to the bank unless they submit to vaccine mandates. Where is this coming from? I mean, from their perspective, it's coming from the West, these policies. It doesn't feel authentic. You have a large part of the population that exists in the informal economic sector, that will not survive lockdowns, and that can't abide by a lot of these mandates. What will happen to them? I think these are things that need to be considered. I think this is what is so unsettling about what Nicki Minaj said. It's why the White House is trying to co-opt her. She right now is far more threatening and unsettling to the centers of power in the US than anything said or worn by the second most famous self-styled socialist, AOC.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really didn't have Nicki Minaj on my radar at all. I'm not really a fan of her music either, to be candid. But yeah, I was quite surprised how outspoken she was, and Just thought that was amazing, that the capitalism builds up these celebrities, and then if you have one start speaking genuinely or going off script, that can really jeopardize the narratives. So,
Yeah.
I was emboldened by that. I thought that was pretty awesome. But you have to
I mean,
wonder,
this is where we are. This is where we are in the US right now, where it's just random people coming out and speaking out and threatening power. It's not who we typically expect. And those who we would expect to challenge power, who define themselves as socialists, are fully invested in the contemporary system and trusting the experts and so on. So, I mean, I'm thinking of Bernie or AOC.
right.
And then you have Tulsi Gabbard basically fully embodying the harshest critique of herself after she did at one point actually threaten the national security state.
Yeah, and again, I think that's really the only kind of hope to push back on, on these initiatives. Really, is celebrities, because even like from a political perspective, it's fallen into a really kind of partisan divide where it's this battle between these kind of Trump supporting governors like DeSantis and the federal government. Yeah, I think it's got to be coming from people like Nicki Minaj and Joe Rogan, who are kind of raising concerns among average people outside of traditional left-right politics.
Yeah, a quick comment on Joe Rogan. He got COVID. He was demonized because he's raised questions about the new normal, about the official narrative. The same way, those of us who've raised questions about official narratives on, foreign policy or, dirty wars in the Middle East have been demonized, but in a much darker way. You could sense in the demonization there was a hope that he would actually die for questioning
They openly that, and that's one of the just most eye-opening things too, is the fact that you have all these liberals online cheering when anti-vaxxers die or mocking it. It's really sickening.
Yeah, and it's encouraged at the highest level. I mean, you can see the CDC's hand in pushing this kind of fear mongering. It encourages self-censorship too. If you're a public figure and you want to speak out, just keep in mind, if you get COVID, everyone's going to be cheering for your death. And if you somehow die of it, well, then people will celebrate your death. But what actually happened with Joe Rogan was that he came out and boasted about taking early treatments. He recovered in 2 days. He did what you're supposed to do, what people who are fully vaccinated, who get breakthrough cases, which is happening more and more, should be doing to stay out of the hospital, which is to go get monoclonal antibody treatments. Like, if you're watching this, I don't give medical advice, but many people that I know and doctors I've spoken to who prescribe early treatments have had great success with monoclonal antibodies. I don't know if they even have any side effects, and you just go to a local clinic. There's a national network where you can just put in your zip code and find out about a clinic to get monoclonals. And Rogan, then he said he used the I word, ivermectin, for some reason that inspires so much anger and hatred. And he said that he took ivermectin in combination with monoclonals and lots of vitamins, and he recovered. And obviously he doesn't have comorbidities. There are a lot of people who do have comorbidities who might actually, they can't do what Joe Rogan did. And that's who vaccinations are for. But the point is, another prominent athlete around the same age as Joe Rogan, who is known as, who's still a professional athlete at age 47, one of the best conditioned boxers in recent history, the Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya, got a breakthrough case and said that he was fully vaccinated. And he tweeted from the hospital that COVID had kicked his ass. I don't know if he took any early treatments or what they gave him, but you didn't see the same kind of cheering and gloating over De La Hoya. In fact, if you read about him having to cancel his fight and possibly cancel his career, which was going to be this big nationally televised like pseudo fight, you have to read to like paragraph 18 in the article to even see that he's fully vaccinated. Whereas the headlines about Rogan were all about him taking ivermectin and being this lunatic anti-vaxxer. And of course, the outcome isn't really that. The recovery of Joe Rogan isn't.
Yeah,
really
right. They don't even
reported.
talk about that. He's taking horse dewormer. It's like, well, he's not taking horse dewormer, but what happened when he took ivermectin?
I mean, this speaks to the whole denigration of science by the science, you know, with a trademark on the end, because ivermectin is one of the most inspiring drugs in history. It was it received, or its pioneers, Dr. William C. Campbell and Dr. Satoshi Omura, received a Nobel Prize in 2018 for pioneering this drug using microorganisms, just pure simplicity. They basically drew on natural organisms to make a drug that wiped out river blindness and elephantitis, two of the most debilitating drugs that were diseases that were harming millions of people in the poorest regions who were the most vulnerable.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. Campbell, who will present his Nobel lecture under the title Ivermectin, a reflection on simplicity.
So at that time, we had information suggesting that ivermectin might be useful in humans against a variety of parasitic worms, including hookworm, for example. But it was clear when one would evaluate the situation that the best way to meet an unmet need in human medicine would be to have it used against river blindness, which is caused by yet another species of Onchocerca, Onchocerca volvulus.
And that drug has been used to treat tens and tens of millions around the world. It's being used in Venezuela right now, a country that had a public health crisis imposed on it by the US. And it's keeping people alive, especially in the tropical and rural regions where, you know, because of the brain drain and medical flight, a lot of clinics have ceased to exist. So this is a wondrous drug. The people who invented it are heroes. And I emailed them to ask if they had any comment about seeing their drug demonized as a horse dewormer, about seeing, you know, Representative Ilhan Omar complain that prisoners who were being given ivermectin were being poisoned. And Campbell responded, and he said that, you know, he's basically taken a vow of silence on this. He will not speak about it, and he won't make a comment on whether it is effective for COVID-19 or not, which is really tragic. But we're seeing their work just denigrated and reduced to this pathetic little football in our trashy culture wars.